What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of Blades with Bill. Today we're going to be talking about lock types. Every lock has its own benefits and downsides. So whether we're talking about lockbacks, liner locks, frame locks, the compression lock, the crossbar locks, which, you know, whether we're talking about for crossbar locks, you have XR lock, able lock, the axis lock, which was the original of them, button locks. We'll talk about all of them that I know anything about, have had experience with. There's locks out there that I guarantee I have never even seen. So I have no idea how good, bad they are. So we're only going to talk about things that I know anything about. So the oldest lock type that I know of is the lockback. It's probably the first lock of locking knives. And you have extremely old school idea where, like this one, where it's press this back here and you can close it. Most lockbacks, the issue with them is they're two hands to close, because you have to push back here. But on a lot of them, the newer ones, they've started going with this idea where it's not in the very bottom of the, or very back of the handle, it's in the middle, which Spyderco, because they give you that giant finger choil on almost every single one of their lockbacks, makes it real easy to close one-handed. So it's the one thing that Spyderco and a couple other companies have done that have made it to where it's easier to operate a lockback one-handed, so you don't have to use two hands like you would with this guy, like I showed originally. The upside to a lockback is it's a rather strong lock. The downside is the fact you have to use two hands for most of them to close it. Next, we'll talk about the liner locks. Liner locks are great in the idea that it's very easy to operate one-handed. Just like that. Whoop. And that's pretty much the only idea I can come up with for why somebody came up with this kind of lock. So we'd have easy access to the lock and not ever have to actually use two hands. The downside to a liner lock is over time they can kind of get to where, from rubbing on the actual lock here and the tang of the knife, it'll start getting to where it'll overlock and end up making it hard to unlock. So it's not a bad lock. It's going to take some time to get there. I mean, look at my poor Tenacious here. This thing's been through hell. Lockbacks or liner locks are great, and the fact that it makes it easy was, I would assume, one of the first, if not the first, lock design that made it real easy to just close one-handed. In that same idea, we have the frame lock. Frame lock is essentially a liner lock, except instead of having a little piece of the liner, steel liner or whatever liner they want to use, whatever metal they want to use for the liner. You have a rather thick piece of metal. In this case, and in a lot of cases, it's titanium. In some cases, it's steel. It just kind of depends. Steel liner lock or steel frame locks are much cheaper than titanium, obviously. The upside to titanium frame locks, they're lighter than a steel frame lock. But they still have, both frame locks and liner locks have the same major disadvantage, that in order to unlock it, your finger's in the path of the blade. So your finger's right there. On some of them, they drop rather quick, and when they do, it can be a little, you know, whoop, watch your finger kind of thing. If you're used to it, it's not a big deal. Just be, you know, careful what you're doing. Now, next we're going to talk about Spyderco's compression lock. Compression lock is great in the fact that it gets your fingers out of the path of the blade when you close it. So it makes it much safer to use. Super easy to use one-handed. Spyderco, even, most of them are like this one, where it's got a cutout to get to. So it's real easy to just stick your finger in there, close it. This one, as far as I know, is the only one that Spyderco makes that is still a compression lock, but it has a button to actually disengage. And that's why I like this one more than most. That, and it's got an extremely, extremely slicey blade. It's great Spyderco. Now, this one, I only have one knife of this lock type, but from what I saw, Cold Steel only makes 2 different knives with this, and one is this, which is the Engage that I picked up for like 50 bucks, and it's nice because, again, get your fingers are out of the way of the blade. It's super fidgety. I have no idea how strong of a lock this is. I know that, to me, this seems kind of like a shark lock, in the fact that you're back here, you're pulling this back. Same thing as a shark lock, except shark lock's usually a little higher. I have no idea if they're the same thing or not for sure, but it's what it reminded me of. That's why I went ahead and bought it. I've never tried a shark lock, so I have no idea if this is exactly like that. I know the shark lock can handle 600 pounds on the lock before it'll break, which is rather impressive for a folding knife. This, I could guarantee you, would not take 600 pounds to break. The handles are not going to take it. Having said that, I have no idea what kind of strength there is to this lock. It's not something that is ever going to be a super hard use knife. The steel on it is not made for it. So, but that's the Atlas lock from Cold Steel. We'll get into the crossbar locks, and there's a bunch of them. The original, not on this knife, but the original company is Benchmade, and they came out with this, which is the Axis lock, and until their patent on it ran out, they were the only ones that were doing it. Now that that's run out, you have SOG and their XR lock. Hogue and the Able lock. Then you have companies like Bear & Sons with this Bear Ops where they call it a slide lock. The SRM company, I believe, calls it an axis lock, but I personally think they should just go with crossbar lock. If you want to come up with your own name for it, so be it, but otherwise, just call it a crossbar lock. It's easier for everybody else. Now, as you saw, crossbar locks are great in the fact that hands completely out of the way of the blade. An extremely strong lock, as that little bar right there, you'd have to break that bar or bend it for this lock to fail. That's going to take a lot. I have no idea how much, but it's going to take a lot. I also know the one downside to the knives like this that have a crossbar lock is that the spring that actually creates the tension to hold the lock in place can break. I've never personally had it happen, but I've heard that it can happen, so it is possible. Now, I will throw in with this the Spyderco Manix 2, which Spyderco has a couple of different knives that use this, which is this isn't a crossbar lock, it's a caged ball bearing in there that actually creates the lock. But essentially it's kind of the same in the fact that it's a piece of metal causing the lockup and springs. And it basically works the same way. You pull back and it'll close. So I went ahead and threw the ball lock in with the crossbar locks just to go ahead, and it is a knife type or a knife lock that I have used. I have some experience with. All of them, even the Spyderco there, seem to have an extremely strong lock. I'm never going to find out what it's going to take to break it. I'm not crazy. If I want to baton some freaking wood and split it like that, I have fixed blades for that crap. I have machetes. I have all kinds of things for working outside. Pocket knives are not meant for that kind of stuff, unless you're talking about, companies like Cold Steel where let's see how tough our locks can get, which power to them. If you want to make a locking or a folding knife that has essentially the ability to be a fixed blade, go for it, Cold Steel. Button locks are again nice because keep your hand completely out of the path of the blade. And I do consider things like the SBR from ProTech to be a knife that is a button lock. You do have to press the button to get it to be able to unlock, disengage. So essentially it is a button lock. It's just a push button auto that you have to push the same button to disengage the lock. So I went ahead and threw in auto, push button autos, and just regular things like this Kaiser original as a button lock, and threw them all together. Again, I have no idea exactly how strong they are. I know if you can see the bar there, that's what you'd have to break to get knife's lock to fail? I have no idea what that would take. I would assume a lot. So I'm not too worried about it. I know the springs in it can break, and then essentially you'd end up with, it may still lock up, it may not. I know on a lot of these though, a lot of these companies have good warranties, so if something like that would happen, you probably can get it fixed. And then lastly, talk about the OTF. Again, I don't know exactly what you want to call this kind of lock, but I know once it's out, it's locked. A lot of people wonder exactly what this kind of knife will take. Again, I have no exact idea. I do know I've seen videos of people taking OTF knife that was something like this, or Microtech or whatever, but an OTF, stabbing it into a ballistic gel head that had brains in it, everything, so it was basically like stabbing a human skull. Didn't fail, didn't even come close to failing. They purposely aimed for the hardest part of the skull and jammed the knife in, and it went in no problem. Didn't fail. So, is this the strongest lock out there? Probably not. But if you're looking for something that's, if you had to use it for self-defense, yes, this would absolutely be able to take stabbing another human being if you absolutely had to. I don't condone having to do so. I don't see my knives as self-defense things. I carry a knife for the 100 reasons that come up. Cutting cardboard, the fact that I like having knives, I like knives. So I don't necessarily see them as a self-defense tool. It can be used as one, and I know that, but it's not my main purpose for them. I'm not going to tell anybody what one's better than any other. I personally prefer locks that keep your fingers out of the way, but it doesn't have to. Like I said, I'll carry this all day long, and it's a lockback. Leave a comment down below. What's your favorite lock type? If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you get notified every time I release a new video. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Blades with Bill. You can also follow me on Facebook as Blades with Bill, and I have my own Facebook page, which is Blades with Bill. So feel free to follow me on all my socials. Say hi. I'm sure that I'll respond. Like I said, I'm pretty much always on or around my phone and social media stuff. So have a great day. Stay safe. Peace.